All right, so let's dive first into Publisher. Then I'll make another video that'll be for Designer and another one for Photo. We'll go through these. I'll divide them up that way, so that way you can watch the ones you need to watch the most and review them when you need to. All right, so what I have here is Publisher. I've already opened it. I'm assuming you'll know how to do that just fine. But when it comes up, the default setting is to bring up this window, and it may land on Account or New or Open or Recent or something, so it may be on one of the other tabs, but I'm just going to start the tutorial as if it showed you the top one, Account. As you go along, if you want, you can always untick this Show on Startup, and then it won't present this. And if you needed to get back to it, you just go to File and New, and it would pop back up. So, but because they've made a lot of changes to this pop-up, because in the old version 110, I used to have it unticked and I didn't have it keep showing up. But they've made so many improvements to this particular part that I plan to just have it always show on startup. And it seems to pick wherever I left off last time to be the first of these. So the top one, let's start at the top. Since this is the first thing you see when you launch Publisher, or it also does it in Designer and Photo as well, the same way. Let's start with just talking about what's here. It's your account. If you have the universal license, this is the account is where it's going to link things so that they're commonly shared between Affinity, Designer, and Photo, which is quite excellent. They've improved that a lot in version 2. There's a whole lot more than they had started to implement it at 110, but this is much more than it had been before. You can tell what version you're on. If they have an update, you'll know that as soon as you launch it, because they put a little pop-up message to tell you that you have an update and asks if you want to install it. So at the time of this recording, I'm on version 204 with build number 1701. And I'm on a Windows machine. This should look the same for you Mac users. And as a note, if I get into using shortcuts and you are on a Mac, I'm pretty sure that it's pretty easy to figure out the difference. The Windows machines have control keys, and I think it's a command key on Mac. I'm not sure if your Alt key has a different name or not, but I think at this point the Mac users know what the conversion is from the Windows names for the keys. So anyway, so when you launch here, you may not see all the things that I've got here, my add-ons, because I have over the last couple of years purchased a whole bunch of add-ons from Affinity's store. So if you buy anything through Affinity's own store, they will show up here. And I think I own not everything, but a lot, because they ran that sale during the pandemic where everything was like, I don't know, half off or something like that. So it made it real cheap. So I kind of, bought a bunch of stuff. I don't own everything, but I own most things. If you install other people's things that you get, but not through the store, through Serif's store, they won't show up here. This is just from what's in your account according to Affinity's own, account settings and stuff. So that's what's here. You can browse around. You can even go to the store. I'd wait till they have a nice sale and then I'd go get stuff. At the time of the recording, I don't think there's anything on sale at the moment. Just the upgrade to version 2. So the next thing is new. And this has been overhauled in 110, and it is excellent. So a couple of things to know about here, and I'm just going to have you open just a basic document so you can go through the other settings when we move into studio panels and all the other things that I want to show you for getting started. But I have customized this, so it probably looks a little different than yours does. But you'll have some basic categories for like print and press ready. I don't know, I may have organized. It doesn't default this back when I hit factory default, so it keeps this stuff. So, but you'll have things that are different. So I've got, I know you have a devices category because I didn't change that. So, but you may find that your categories are a little different and you may want to organize them like I did differently. So you can do a couple of things here. First off, anything you put over here is going to show you, like right now, it's set up for, I don't even know where it's like marked up. Oh, so when I did this, I went under print and letter, which that might be a little different than yours, but you can find something like that. So US letter size, but as soon as I click on it and it's blue, so you know that's the one selected, it tells you that this one here is set for 8.5 by 11 with 300 DPI, and that it prefers embedded images. Those are kind of the key things. If you're using US letter, you probably are working in inches, but you can always change this to millimeters, centimeters, you know, the metric, or work in, sometimes it's useful to work in points, pixels, for certain things, not for this. It just kind of fits with what you're doing here. US letter obviously is going to be in inches, but if we were doing something with a social media post, like you can see this up here, these are just some, I think these are their defaults. It says PX for pixels. So then you can go through and you can say whether you want facing pages. That's a publisher thing, so you won't see that in Designer and Photo. But if you're in Publisher, you can tell it whether you want it to open with facing pages. If you don't select that and you want it later, you can change it once you're in the interface, or vice versa. If you didn't want it and you have it, so and then you can pick your color settings. If you're going to be doing things that you intend to have printed, like maybe your goal is to create stuff and upload it for Amazon to print through KDP, I highly recommend, if you know you're going to be printing, is you do CMYK. Yes, you can convert it later. So if you did things in RGB and later on you're like, yeah, I want to go send that to KDP, yeah, you can convert it. But CMYK has a lot fewer colors to work with. They don't necessarily look quite as vibrant on a computer screen. So if you're making things that you intend only to exist on a, so that they'd be looked at through a computer screen or an iPad screen or phone screen, leave it at RGB because you'll get more vibrant colors. But I tend to like to work in CMYK only because, well, I'm starting to do things with KDP, but also I print things on my printer at home. Now, to note, your printer already knows how to convert RGB to CMYK, so don't even worry about if you're only home printing or your customers are only home printing. That doesn't matter. Your computer and your printer know how to make that conversion, and you don't need to think about it. But if you're sending to Amazon, it wants it in CMYK. Other printing places probably also want it in CMYK, but there are a lot fewer colors. Like you can't get neon colors and stuff. They just don't make ink in standard printing facilities that are neon green and orange and hot pink. You can get approximations, but if you work in CMYK, you'll get colors that look much more like what you're going to get printed. So just know that you can do what you want. You may see that I often do CMYK, but it's up to you. If you're just making graphics to put on Pinterest or your website listings or Etsy, use RGB for those things, for mock-ups and stuff that'll never get printed out. Margins can be helpful. They don't get printed. They're just guides for you. You can change it around to whatever you prefer. Or you can untick it and not have margins at all. You can set that up later if you don't do it now. You can do it later when you're in the document and bleed is you find out if you needed that, like KDP needs it for certain things, but they'll give you instruction and you just pop in the amounts you want for that. So that's kind of an overview. You can change this in any way, shape you want. And what's really nice in here now is if you set this up, and we've got it in portrait, this one shows side-by-side portrait, but we can also go up here to the top and you can just toggle between horizontal or portrait and or vertical and portrait and horizontal and landscape. You can just toggle between them here. In the old version, you had to make presets or make changes before you opened that reflected that, but now you can just set it up and go, nah, I'd like to have it in the opposite, and so you can just do that. That's like super handy. So I used to have to set up a preset for the portrait, a preset for the landscape. Even though they were exactly the same dimensions, I no longer have to do that. I just have to pick one and then I toggle it up here. So that's that, and then if we were ready, we'd just hit create. We'll do that in a minute, but I want to show you how to move these categories around, because first you need a few things to move around, although you can move the things that came by default. We've got some icons down here. We have create a preset, we have create a category, we have rename preset, and we have a delete preset. So this is how you do things with presets and categories as well. So you can, I should also mention just before I go into this, because I'm going to give you an alternative, there are these hearts here. So if you mark off, let's say I made a new category, and this was some demo we did before, but I'll put a little heart next to it. So you can put a heart, it means it's one of your favorites. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off, and then if you go up here and you hit the heart, it'll only show you the ones that you put little hearts next to. And so that's really handy, but there's also another way to do this, because if you add things, chances are you're going to find that they're like way down at the bottom of the list, and you can actually slide these categories around. Like I have this demo category that I did for the live training with you guys. It's somewhere in the January videos. But we can take this, and as soon as I press my mouse button down and hold, it suddenly flips to just showing you categories. And now I can slide it, and if you look carefully, you'll see a little blue line that sits, it keeps moving between them. So I could move new category up to the top. It's kind of hard to see because it's covering its blue line now, but if I let it go, it expands back out again. But now new category's at the top. If I do it again, I'm going to press the mouse button down, hold, drag, and now I can put new category at the bottom. Whoops, it didn't take it. So if it doesn't take it, it's just it didn't pick it up. We'll put it here. So now it'll be way down here, new category. So I think I'll leave that back up at the top, because I may want to use it for the rest of the demo. So that is that. There's also a little hamburger menu. That hamburger menu is what they call when you get like 3 or 4 lines horizontal like that. You can rename the category or you can delete it entirely. So I could just call it demo category, just for something to call it. So that's that. But how did I get that there? So that's where these come in. So let's say I wanted, I don't even know if this exists in here. Let's say I'm going to be making a KDP workbook, but I don't want it 8.5 by 11. I want it 10 inches by 8 inches. I don't have to put .0, but I did anyway. So, and it's in inches. I'm not as familiar being in the United States with the metric, so I won't try to come up with a common metric dimension for you. But you guys that are in other parts of the world that use metric, you'll know what to do there. You just change it over to centimeters or whatever you like using. So I'll do that. Now I see that I've got it going horizontal. which might have some nice applications, but I really want it in landscape. It doesn't matter. I mean, I can just for my own way of looking at it, change it so it looks the way I'm thinking. It doesn't matter when you're creating a preset because you can always toggle between them. So don't worry about that. It's just more for how your brain's looking at it. And so all those things are fine. I'm actually going to, for the demo, take off facing pages, just to give you something else. We can always flip it around as we're going through other trainings in the future, but for this one, I'm just going to leave it unchecked, and I'll leave the CMYK, and I always think that margin looks way too big, but you know, I can change these later, so don't even worry about it. Just kind of do your best effort, whatever looks closest. I'm not going to worry about bleed for now. That's pretty good. And I want to save it. So I can go over here and it says create preset. So if I click on preset, the thing I just configured lets me give it a name. So we'll do 8.5 by 10 single page, because we unticked the facing pages, and I'm going to do it for KDP. Let's type it this way, KDP workbook. You can always change the name later if you realize you want to do it for something else, and you can pick what category you want it in. I'll leave it in demo category, but I did make another category that I put in there for KDP print ready, so I might move it later. But for now, we'll leave it in demo. You can pick icons and hit OK. So I put it up here. And there you have it. So that's how you do that. That's how you slide them. You can slide them around. You can also move that. Say I did want it down here. I can move it down here. There should be a blue line. It might be hard to see, but now it's been moved down here. So you just can kind of slide it around. So just slide things around. Does the same thing on the iPad if you're using iPad. I actually figured it out that it worked this way because I was on the iPad. It was actually more obvious on the iPad. So create a preset. If I want to make a category, I can just make another category. It'll add it in, then you can add presets to it. If I want to rename the preset, maybe I didn't like the name of it, you can just hit that. Well, it doesn't want to do it for some reason. Rename preset. I don't know. I'll just right click and do rename. I don't know why it doesn't want to pick it, but if you find that you have it grayed out, just right click it and hit rename preset. Seems odd that it doesn't, or you can delete it. So the right click on here is the same as these two icons right here. All right, so that's that. Before I go create it, I just want to give you a little view of what else is in here. So we have open, that just launches to whatever folder you last were in. Apparently I was in my KDP templates, so that's what pops up when I hit open. If I go to recent, anything I've been opening recent, it's been keeping track of, and it gives you little icons. You can also change that so it's a list if you prefer it in a list, so you can do that either way. You can pin things. I don't have anything pinned, so it's doing all. If you want to pin it, say I want to pin this one. Doesn't look terribly different, but I've pinned it. Actually, it does look different. When I move the mouse away, it's the only one with a pin in the corner. So then I can do it that way. So those are a couple things you could do on recent. Templates. You know, I thought that this was brand new to version 2. Turns out they had a templates folder or a shortcut in the new screen on the old 110, but I never noticed it. So it was there, but it's more obvious now because they've put all the other things in here, and this just functions a lot better. But in here under templates, you can have it, and I've linked several folders at this point and subfolders, but I've created on my storage drive, I use OneDrive. I also use Dropbox now, but OneDrive's my preferred one. But I have a folder that I just put anything I want to use as an Affinity template. But turns out it doesn't matter if it's a template. You can put almost anything in here. It's more like shortcuts that you can pick right from here. Like I actually made a folder inside my quote templates folder for fonts. Now it's not going to show anything in fonts because I can't open a font as a file, but it just made it easier to find things, especially when I'm on the iPad, so I can install the fonts over on the iPad. I don't need to do that for the desktop here. You install it differently on a desktop, but the iPad, I needed the fonts in a quick location. But just basically, you can put anything in the folders. They don't have to be template files. But if I go through here, like here's some of the demo files that I did for the first guided tutorial for January. And plus I was making thumbnails for the YouTube channel, so you guys could have that in front of your videos. But these were the files that I used both for preparing and also for the actual tutorial that day. So they're in here, and then my KDP templates are going in there. I've got mock-up templates, so you can categorize it. And if you want to add folder, here it is, just add the folder. So if you hit that icon at the bottom, decide what you want to put in. I could, like, not that there's anything in here, but you guys have a folder on my computer, and I could select that, and it will add it in here. So that's there. If I didn't want to add it, I could remove the folder. So, and I've got a whole bunch of things linked in here. It looks like I've already looks like it added it twice. I guess I did that one before in the live demo, so I don't really need 2 copies, so I'll get rid of that. Oh, it took both out, so that's fine. You can always add it back. It's not deleting your folder, it's just deleting the shortcut that you can see here. So have fun with that, because that's like really handy to be able to have this shortcut there. And then samples, these are from Affinity themselves. They're used in on their YouTube channel for the tutorials that they put up there. So they put them in here. If you want to follow one of Affinity's own tutorials, you can just go find the sample and it'll make a copy for you on your computer, and you can play around with it. You can look at the layers and the fonts and whatever they have in their tutorial. They'll walk you through it. So definitely check them out on YouTube and you know, bookmark their channel or subscribe to their channel. So so that's that. So those are your different things there. I won't hit open, it'll pop something up. Recent, templates, samples. But let's go and create this 8 by 10. So in Publisher, and Designer and Photo, whatever document you open will have some variation. So on on what gets displayed, you'll find that when you launch, a lot of times what's over on this right side over here will look a lot similar on first impression. As you look closer, you'll realize it does look different. You'll have a toolbar going down the side over here. On first impression, it'll look the same, but on closer inspection, you'll realize it has different tools on it. So, and then we're in Publisher, so you're going to get pages as if you're going through a document, kind of the way it looks in PowerPoint in a way. So just so you know what things are called, these things here, which are tabbed, and there's in Publisher default, we have color, swatches, stroke, and then they have a midsection of layers, character, paragraphs, text styles, and down at the bottom they have transform, navigator, history, and they kind of bounce around depending on how much space they're using up, so it kind of looks a little jumpy. These are each called studio panels. So each of these things are studio panels. This over on the left side, the far left side, is your toolbar. Pages and stock are also studio panels, but by default they put those two over on the left next to your toolbar and put all the other studio panels on the right side. And then up at the top, this is your context toolbar. So that by it being a context toolbar, that means every time you click on a tool in the toolbar, that toolbar will change the context of what's going on the screen, and you'll get different things up at the top. And actually where I really should be pointing is just slightly below that line to right here, because as we're on the move tool, which is the arrow, and if you hover over it, you'll get your tooltips. I know my mouse seems to cover up the tooltip, but it says move tool. But the move tool just has no selection because I don't have anything on the canvas or the page or whatever you want to call it. But we do have document setup and preferences. But if I switch to the view tool, which is the little hand, then you can see it change. It didn't change the top one, though sometimes the very top one does change, but mostly we're looking at this slightly darker gray shade here. So you got pan, you can zoom in and out, you can change what it is that you put in. So if you started in inches and it's easier to think in metric, you can change it to centimeters. Or if you need it in pixels because you're working on social media, which is easier to think in pixels, then you can switch it here. Then you've got the zoom tool, which is almost the same thing. It just has a little tool that lets you click in and out, whereas the hand tool is more about moving it around. And I'm holding the mouse down when I do this. So, which I should mention as I was doing that just now, because you might wonder how I do this and that and do them simultaneously. So what I've got is a setting in preferences, which I'll go to in a minute, and that just lets me press down on the roller button on my mouse. I don't know how you do this if you're using the touchpad on your laptop, because I don't use that. I'm a mouse person. Shannon, who's in the group, who's also been meeting with me in the, I call it as the kind of beta group, for like a year and a half, 2 years. She is a trackpad person, so if you need to know about how to use the trackpad because you don't use the mouse, Shannon is your go-to person. I'm the mouse person. So I'll show you how to do that in a bit, but by holding the mouse wheel down and rolling it and moving the mice around on the desk here, I can simultaneously zoom in and out, depending on which way I roll the mouse, and slide it, depending on where I slide the mouse to. I'm going to go through the toolbar first, and then I'll go into preferences so you can know how to set that up. But we got zoom, and then you can just kind of flip through these things and see what happens. You get the hang of the toolbar and what it does. So now I'm on text tool. The little triangle in the corner, that is so that it lets you know that that there's a sub menu that you can swing out here. If you click on the little tiny triangle in the corner, it'll expand the sub menu, and you can choose between artistic text tool and frame tool, which we'll get into at a later point, but that's what those are. This is the table tool. And each time I click these, things at the top change. This one hasn't really changed away from text because I have to draw a table. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So, data merge, I won't go over that right now. That's more advanced. We've got shapes. Right now it's on polygon for some reason, probably the last thing I used. But it has a little triangle. Swing out that submenu and there's all of your shapes. There's also, you'll find that people like to make little YouTube videos about the hidden shape tool. It's a cat. I'll show you how to add that in a bit, but there's a cat that they just don't put in there by default. I guess it's their thing to have you go hunting and get to know the interface. So these ones, two shapes, the circle and the square with the line through, those are for picture frames. They work similar to shapes. You can also turn a shape into a picture frame. Any shape can be a picture frame, but you've got picture frame tools that are rectangle and circular. This is to place images. This one is to crop, and it says vector crop tool. So we'll get into what those things are later, but it's for cropping images. Now I may have changed this out. You may have one thing that looks like an eyedropper and has a little triangle like that, and when you swing it out you see both, and I'm pretty sure that's the default, but I changed those, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, so that I have them individually because I preferred it that way. This is the pen tool and the node tool. They kind of work together, so if the defaults have them in different places, you might want to do what I did, kind of tuck them next to each other because they're totally related to each other. This is a fill tool and a transparency tool. I don't use them too often, but they're there. They can be handy. And this is something new that I haven't entirely figured out why they have that down there, but I'm sure that in a bit I will start to know the importance of that. So stay tuned. I still deal with that over here on that color up here because it's the same thing, but I'm sure this does something slightly different. That's probably a workflow enhancement because that's what a lot of things have happened with the new version. Version 2 has tons of workflow enhancements, so until I figure out that shortcut, I'm over here in colors. So now I just drew a table, so if I want to move that thing into center, I have to go back to the move tool and just slide it over. I'll leave it up there for now. Not really sure what I'm going to use it for. But that's the tools, and then if you want to change your tools because you're like, but wait, Linda, you've got this set up different than me and I want to change it. So you want to go under View, go to your View menu. By the way, that's the menu up top. That should be obvious, but View, Customize Tools. Once you click that, it will give you all of the options that are here. You can also change the number of columns if you wanted to have 2 columns of tools. I tried doing that and I didn't like it. It was in the last version, so but just so you, if you want to, maybe you'd like it. Here's your cat tool right here. It's kind of hard to tell in the new version. They also changed what the shape tool for the cat was. But that's a cat. It was more obvious. It was a full body cat with a tail sticking up before, but that's the cat tool. So if we wanted to add that, we could put it, just drag it over here and add it. It doesn't want to go into it. So hang on. Maybe if I click on this. Huh. Not quite sure how to add it in there. Anyways, but you can drag things off and leave them over here, or like if I took the hand off and the zoom in, which probably I don't really need them too much. I don't tend to use those because I use the mouse wheel, which I'll show you in a minute. But I do want that move tool. So the move tool is here. I'm going to put the move tool back up here. Just drag it up there. Now I might want to put my pen tool up there. Perhaps I'd like the pen tool up there, and so I can slide these things up here. I want to keep the node next to it. These things all have to do with color and style. We'll keep them together, and that seems fine. And then if you wanted to separate out your artistic text tool and your text frame, which is over here, you could do that. Instead of having the little fly out submenu, you could put it this way and then get rid of that if you want to do that. This is what used to be here, and then these weren't here before because it was a fly out menu, but I just didn't think I wanted that, so I got rid of the fly out menu and I stuck those guys in here. And I think that's the color and that's the style. Yeah, so I want color at the top, style at the bottom. And that all looks good. I'm not sure how to get the cat added in here. Probably he has to be on his own. So, but at the moment, those are the tools that they've got. All the other shapes are already in the flyout. I prefer just to leave it that way. And then if you want to put a separator in for something, just to kind of organize it more, you could do that. I don't think I need that. So that's how that goes. And then when you're done, you just hit close. So the next thing I want to show you is that all these studio panels can be undocked. So like for example, if you take the color tab and you hold your mouse over it and you press the mouse button down and you drag, still holding the mouse button, you can undock it and you can put it wherever you want. But say you were doing something with color and you wanted it right next to what you were doing, and then you were done, you can redock it by sliding it back up. If it turns blue like that, that means it's going to try to put it over here. But just grab it and drag it and wait till it turns, and usually it just wants to snap right in, or it'll turn blue. You can also change the order of them around, so you want them in a different order. You can slide these things around. Say you want your layers, I'm going to move it somewhere else, but say I wanted it up here. I don't, but say I do, I could move these things all up here. Get them all in one thing. I really prefer not having 3 sections anyway, so, but say I wanted that, which is not really true, but I'm just demonstrating sliding them around. That's what you could do. I could take them off one at a time, and if I don't want them at all, you drag them off and undock them, and then you do X and you X them out. You can always bring them back because they're always under the window. These are all of the studio panels that Publisher has, and then over in Designer it is its own set of studio panels, as does Photo. And so the total sum number of studio panels is always under the window. In the old version, it used to be under View, and then you had to come down to something and go to Menu, and they decided that that was slowing workflow down, so now everything's just under Window. So those are all your studio panels. But what you'll find is when you're following my tutorials, not sure where I want to put that right now. We'll get rid of it. Pages is over here by default. I don't like having layers way over there. To me, layers belongs with pages. That's just how my brain likes it. Yesterday I did find an instance where I actually wanted pages, and then I wanted the layers panel undocked over here because I was trying to look at something in master pages, and I found that easier. So you can undock and redock, but I like to have pages and layers next to each other. You will find that when you're following my tutorials, that's where they are. And that over on the right side, I only have 2 sections. And the way I set them up is I like transform right up here. I use transform's way at the bottom, and I don't know why. I use transform all the time. So I want transform, I want color, I want swatches. I like stroke right there. I'm not big into navigator. If you have a very small monitor, like you're working on a small laptop, you might like having navigator because it gives you a view if you're zoomed way in. I don't need it. I'm working on a giant monitor here. So I get rid of that, but if I find I need it, I go back to Windows, and navigator's in here somewhere, right here. So you can always pull it back up. History, I don't tend to need history too often. If I do, I'll pop it up and then I'll close it out. But I do like to have transform open, color, swatches, stroke, and one that's not even open, which is Quick Effects or Quick FX. I like having that one. And when I added it, it stuck it down here, but actually I just prefer to have it right up here. And I believe there's one other I'm going to probably add in there because at some point it just calls it FX. Or I guess it's when I tab through. So these are what you're going to find when I'm doing things, is I tend to only have one thing. Sometimes, well, particularly with Publisher, I may adding a second layer where I might stick. What am I trying to think of here? References, text. Yeah, so they've reorganized it. So under text, this is where I can bring back paragraph. So you might find that I'm doing things, and I do have, I'm trying to get this thing to get turned blue here. That's not really where I want it. Ah, there. So I have to get up close enough to transform, and then it'll turn blue, and then it'll add it there. So I will like to have paragraph character, paragraph next to character, and text frame. Yeah, we'll throw a text frame in there. These are all things for formatting in Publisher. So anyways, but I may be getting too far into the weeds here, but you get the sense that, like, if you're trying to follow a tutorial and I've got things in my panels here, that's how you go. You go up to Windows, and if it's not totally obvious here, you're looking for a flyout menu and looking for it in here. I'll do things with tables. Tables are not the easiest thing. They work very different than PowerPoint. I had to get used to that, but when we get to that, I'll add those in. But that's how you do that. So you can look at the tutorials, and if you need to, when you're looking at the replay, you can always pause it, study the screen, and take your time to go find the things here and to get them docked and all of that. But you will find that in my screens, I like to put my pages and layers and all that over on the left side, and then have the rest of the stuff on the right side. And as we go along, you'll learn about what all these different functions are. I encourage you to just open up a document, just play around. Well, let's go into my preferences so you can see how I move this roller wheel around. Like right now, I'm just moving the wheel, but if I hold down, then that's when I can zoom in and out. So, but that all gets set up in preferences. So if we click preferences, now for this, I'm just going to pause and let you study each of these, so you can pause this replay, look at yours, and just kind of use the settings I'm using, unless you think that you want something different. But these are the ones that I'm currently working with right now. But when you launch preferences, and you have to be on the move tool, so if you can't find preferences up here, it's because you need to go back to the arrow, the move tool first. And you can also get to it through the edit menu. You can go to edit, go down to preferences. Thing with Affinity is you can always get to things in more than one way, sometimes multiple ways, like 3 or 4 different ways. So, but preferences. So this is what I am currently using. So I don't remember what's default and what's not, but just bring yours up, hit pause on the recording and match yours up, and then I'll move to the next one, and you can just do that. So color, I do have it, these are just the default colors, so it's not what it's going to default to. You set that in your documents, your shortcuts on the new, and then that new screen, new document screen. So that's my settings. Performance, I don't think I changed anything there that I remember. User interface, I did make changes on this screen because if you, one thing you might notice is I have a lighter colored screen, and the default settings are for it to be in dark mode. So if I think there's a reset button here. No, that's not the one. So default. I don't know. Dark mode. Yeah, so you probably had your screen set to dark mode. And I used to work that way. My eyes are very sensitive to light, so usually I do work in dark mode. But I found that people were having trouble seeing where my mouse was and what I was doing in the dark mode. It's just there's not enough contrast. So I have switched it over to light mode. And then you can move these sliders around to make the background. And sometimes it helps a lot to have that background be more contrast. Like maybe a little more on the darker side, just so you can see the file, your page that you're working on easier. And then, but just slide them around because they'll change in real time. I'm not sure what this one is moving around. It says artboard, so may reference to things more having to do with designer, because in Publisher you do have your studio panel up here. Studio links, I should say, which I need to show you that too. Text contrast, UI brightness, so just play around with it. But that's where I have it. I think I'll leave my background slightly grayer, which maybe I'll do that, see what that does for designer. Kind of line them up. Tools, Scrubby Zoom. This is the setting, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe it's on by default nowadays, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure Scrubby Zoom is the setting that lets me use my mouse wheel when I press it down, roll it, and drag the mouse around. Let me zoom in every which direction. It's also the reason why I don't need the two icons that I just took out, that was the magnifying glass and that hand, because I don't really need them because of the way I use my mouse. So if you're not a mouse person, you won't need that setting. And you probably will want those other two things back over in your toolbar. Ask Shannon, because she'll know what she does with the touchpad on her laptop. So she also likes having the navigation panel that I took out and got rid of because she has a smaller screen. So she uses that all the time. I don't. So you'll find that you like certain settings and other people don't. That's fine. You want to set this up to work for your brain so your workflow is easier. You know where to find things. If you keep trying to look for your layers over here like I did, but you've got them in the default setting, we'll drag your layers panel to where your brain wants to look for it. If your brain's not looking for layers over here, put it wherever it's looking for it. So, but Scrubby Zoom, that's what that is. I think this is on by default, but that would be pretty important. Synchronizing your tools between documents just makes things more consistent. But those are my defaults. Shortcuts, I haven't made any changes to these. However, Shannon said she had lots of suggestions, and we haven't gone into that. So we will probably cover shortcuts and ways you can add things into this, and I'll probably have Shannon kind of guide us on that because she's the queen of shortcuts. But I just use the default ones at this time till Shannon proves that I need to use a different one. Then I'll change things. Assistant, that I think is just default settings. It just pops up messages and it takes care of things that it needs to for things to work. So you don't have to sit there scratching your head trying to figure out why something's not working. So it has a little more intuitiveness. Like, for example, if you open an image file, like a PNG file, and you put it on your Publisher doc, it needs to rasterize it. It's not actually in the format that Affinity needs in order to manipulate it. So it'll rasterize it, pop them a message, tell you that, and that's what the assistant does. Linked services. I could link Dropbox, but Dropbox is already on my desktop, so I haven't done that. But I did link it on the iPad because I needed to do it there. But you could do that. Right now it's just Dropbox. I'm sure they'll be adding things. This is new in version 2, so I expect to see Google Drive, OneDrive, Amazon's storage and whatever else they have there. So miscellaneous, I don't think there was anything I needed to do there. Autocorrect, I didn't change anything there. Abbreviations, didn't change anything there. Filler text, here you can add your own filler text instead of using the, what's it called, lorem ipsum or ipsum lorem, the fake Latin filler text, which they can use by default, but you can put your own in there. And title exceptions. So most of the things you're going to change are going to be up in the first section. So if you missed it, go wind back, replay, pause, and make any changes you think would be good for yourself. So that's preferences. And the only final thing here, these are the studio panels. Probably should have mentioned that up front. But as long as you have the have designer and photo installed, which if you bought the universal license, you own them. Make sure they're installed. If you own them but you haven't installed them, this won't work. They have to be installed. But this lets you flip on the fly to designer. And once you do this in the studio studio links over here, you can go and make all the same changes I just did over here. And I'm going to make a separate video where I'm actually in those apps directly, not through the studio, because these are studio things. They're not the same as the app itself. But we're in Publisher in the designer persona, and so you can utilize all the same things here. I don't think I've necessarily changed anything here. Maybe I have. I don't think so. I tend to open designer itself or photo itself, and I don't use the studio links as often, so I'm less likely to make changes here. But if I make a change here, chances are it is not going to change over in the app itself. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So, but you can do all the same things. Everything I just mentioned applies over there. And if we flip over to photo, now we're over in photo. And so the difference between them, if you're not already familiar, when you're in Publisher, you're working on page layouts. Think of like a book or a magazine or something that's multi-pages that you're going to put together that probably will be saved as a PDF, most likely, but on that idea, kind of a book format. Designer is for doing layouts that are not documents like in a book format, but you might have multiple images that lay out, and they call them artboards. And so an artboard, you might have an artboard, one for a US letter or an A4 page for like a brochure or something. And then you could put another artboard next to it that's the size of a business card. So you have business cards that matches the company letterhead kind of thing. And then you might have a social media post, and all the artboards can be different sizes. And you can lay them all out next to each other. But the other important thing to know about Designer is it's for vector. And we'll talk about what that means later. But vector is a certain type of image thing that has its own set of tools. I'll save the rest of the explanation for later. And then photo, instead of being vector like Designer, photo focuses more on raster or pixel images. Those would be your PNG, your JPEG images. But in Affinity, you get tools that overlap between all of them. You'll find that you've got vector stuff in photo, and you got raster stuff in Designer, and then Publisher has some of all, plus Publisher has the studio link. So the nice thing about Affinity is you can do lots of things and have lots of crossover between functionality. So, but as you can see, when I went to photo, different tools, some changes over on the studio panel. So I think that's it for Publisher for that. Take your time to go through, look at what all of these menu items are up here, because there's even more stuff. And if you can't find the tool for it in the toolbars or over in the studio panels, you'll probably find what you want here. There's all sorts of things. Some of these things will become active when we use certain other tools. More things you can do to layers and all of that. So, but just play around, open a file, any size document. Doesn't really matter what the size is if you're just getting to know it. I put the table up here. I don't know what to do with it at the moment. It's not the first thing I would try to teach someone is a table, but you can just go ahead and do that. You'll notice that when you do use the table tool, that if you slide over just a tiny bit, you'll get a bunch. As you scroll down, you'll get more rows, and as you go over, eventually it'll add columns. And if you want to add some, you can just hit the little double arrows here, and it'll change the number of columns. So you only wanted 2 columns, so you do 2. But play around with it. I'm not going to teach you all about tables. This is a getting to know your interface video. But my point is, just click on things and play and go, what does tables do? And then we'll get to it in the training. If you want to get rid of it, just select it, hit delete, and you have to select the whole table to delete it. And just maybe I'll right click it and delete it. No columns. Eventually get rid of it. Delete. This would be a quick way to get rid of it. Sometimes even I don't know. Oh, move tool. That would probably help. If you can't figure it out, I always go back to the move tool and then delete it. It's just so much easier. Even I forget to be on the move tool. But that's it for now. Probably was more of a deep dive than you needed, and I probably forgot a few things that you're sitting here going, but Linda, what about that? And if you are wondering, what about that? Because I probably did overlook some things and go into the weeds and other things, please let me know. You can always use the link in the members area to the Q&A and suggestions, and put it in there, because I'll pick up that. If you need to, you can send me an email as well, and I'll either cover it in the training, or if it needs to have its own how-to video, I'll put another one of these together. So let's end this one, and then I am going to move on to doing Designer next, and then Photo. All right, stay tuned.